All right, fun fact, I made an entire video filling these notes out for you guys, and I was going back and forth between the document camera showing the notes and my laptop camera showing me, and then apparently going back and forth doesn't work because when I was done, the video was only the 30 seconds long of the just showing me. So it's just going to be this, and it's already filled out, so this is going to kind of be the express version here. So heredity is passing on traits from one version to the next. People have noticed heredity for hundreds of years. It's not any kind of an explanation. It's just, hey, you kind of look like your dad, or hey, this certain kind of nose shape is in this family. That's crazy. When we're talking about traits, we're talking about categories. So categories such as height, categories such as color, such as build. But you notice this does not say tall or short. This does not say purple or white. It's the category. Okay, so traits are categories. The different versions of the trait, when we say versions of a trait, then we get specific. We say tall or short, or we say purple or white. We've noticed that certain traits run in families for a long time. When we start getting to the science of it, the science of how heredity works, we named it after what we kind of figured out causes heredity, and that is the genes. Okay, so genes, when we're studying how genes work, the science is genetics. Our father of genetics was an Austrian monk named Gregor Mendel, and he worked in the garden, and he grew a ton of pea plants. And he was very, very lucky when he picked pea plants, and we'll talk about why here in a little bit. When we're talking about genetics, we're going to focus on organisms that reproduce sexually because they're a mix of their parents. If we were looking at the genetics of asexually reproducing things, it would be incredibly boring because everything is just an exact copy of its parent. So there's not a lot of stuff going on there. In most animals, reproducing things, animals, plants, fungi, our reproductive cells that we use to produce the next generation of offspring are called gametes. You may not know that word, but you probably know egg and sperm, and those are the gametes that animals use. So egg would be the female gamete, sperm would be the male gamete. In plants, we use very, very similar things. We have the egg still there, but then the male one, instead of saying sperm, a lot of time we are talking about the pollen grain. And so let's think about this for a second. If egg and sperm have to come together to make a new organism, the amount of DNA in each of them has got to be half of what a normal cell has. So if you think about humans, a normal human cell has 46 chromosomes. Okay, so if I think about this over here, normal cell has 46 chromosomes. Okay, and if we're going to take an egg plus sperm together to make a new organism with 46 chromosomes, how many chromosomes does each of these have to have? Well, the obvious answer is half of that. So that each one would have 23 instead of 46. And so we use this word haploid to refer to any cell that has half the number. They have the number of the DNA of a normal cell. Eventually, when they come together, an egg and sperm come together, that process is called fertilization. And then the cell that is made when they combine is the zygote. So a zygote is the first cell of a new organism that has all the DNA needed to make the new organism. So zygotes now have 2 copies of every bit of genetic instructions, one set from mom, one set from dad. So we stick a prefix that means 2 on the front, diploid, for cells that have the normal amount of DNA, which is 2 copies, one from each parent. All right, so let's talk about Mendel and how lucky he is for a second here. So he picked pea plants, which have a ton of what we now call Mendelian traits after Mendel. So these are traits that have only 2 versions. So he had pea plants that had purple flowers and pea plants that had white flowers. There was no in between, right? They were purple or they were white. There was tall and there was short. And again, when I say tall and short for pea plants, it's not like comparing Mr. Baltz to Mr. Hall in terms of tall and short. We're talking about like standard height people to people that have dwarfism. Okay, so they're very genetically and obviously different, just like when we say tall and short here. And same idea with yellow and green peas, right? There's yellow and green. There's nothing in between. So Mendelian traits are ones that have only one or the other version of a trait without in between. So through careful breeding, he developed pure breeding strains that always had the same version of traits, kind of like breeds in dogs. So when we say careful breeding, this is what we're talking about. So the plant he wanted to be the dad, he physically, with the paintbrush, took the pollen off of the male part of the plant and transferred it to the female part of the one he wanted to be the mom. And he also cut off the male parts of the one to be the mom, so he'd make sure that there's no possibility that it pollinated itself. So for careful breeding, he developed these pure breeding strains. He would take pure breeding strains and cross them with each other to create what he called hybrid plants. So to do this, he cut off the male parts from the one he wanted to be the mom, used a paintbrush to pollinate the flowers with pollen from a different flower, the one he wanted to be the dad. So he knew with certainty later on when those mama flowers produced a pod of peas, who was the mom plant and who was the dad plant. And so he called the plants he got when he crossed his pure breeding pea plants hybrids. Just like if I took a purebred Labrador and a purebred poodle and I crossed them together, I might get what's called a hybrid, a Labradoodle. So that is a word that we can use in lots of contexts. And that is right where we're going to stop.